Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto was a player of League of Legends. Meet Naruto Uzumaki, a not-so-regular teen with a passion for the MOBA game League of Legends even though he sucked at it. His life was normal until he was introduced to the supernatural world and found out he had an irregular sacred gear. So, the problem? How should he fend off Amano Yuuma? With Lucian's relic pistols? There are so many choices. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel, and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard. Chapter 30. Surzek's peerage was, without a doubt, the current strongest group in the entire underworld, so it was obvious for them to be the one who took on the larger and far more dangerous monster, Jabberwocky. But despite having an entire battalion of Valkyries to assist them in their battle against the gigantic monster, there's still little that they could do to slow it down. Grafia was leading the charge against super demonic monster, despite being a free queen, and not an official member of Surzek's Lucifer's peerage, having decided to be traded over to someone who she felt belonged to in the future. Her position as the silver-haired Queen of Annihilation, and the fact that she was very possibly the one of the two strongest women of the underworld, made her more than sufficient to lead the battle. Suji-san, take out its right leg. We must not allow this monster to leave this area. Grafia shouted as she created an enormous wall of ice to slow the Jabberwocky, which was currently making its way toward the Bandersnatch currently rampaging on the other side of the city. A magic circle then appeared in the palm of her hand, sending out a powerful wave of ice spears at the anti-monsters that spawned by the Jabberwocky, and were trying to sneak up on her. Despite their strong resistance to demonic power, their bodies were immediately shredded to pieces by the spears. I'm on it, Grafia-san. Suji Okita, the former captain of the Shizengumi and currently the only knight of Surzek's Lucifer, replied with a determined expression on his face, as he assumed a stance of the Tenin Rishin Ryu Kenjutsu, and then dashed forward at godly speed, moving so much faster than the normal eye could follow. In a blink of an eye, Suji appeared behind the gigantic monster, which then had its right leg severed from its body, making it unleash an earth-shaking roar before Grafia, with the assist of McGregor Mathers, unleashed a barrage of powerful elemental magic at the super-demonic beast. Everyone watch out! A Valkyrie shouted from her winged horse as the Jabberwock began to gather a tremendous amount of power before it launched a gigantic fireball at the combatants on the ground, making Grafia create a wall of ice to protect everyone, and quite possibly the entire city from it. Concentrated beams of light were then fired from all over its body, cracking Grafia's wall before it was completely shattered, forcing the silver-haired woman and everyone else to immediately jump away to dodge it. Despite suffering no casualty when the attack ended, an entire section of the city had been completely annihilated, leaving behind crumbling buildings and destroyed structures. To Grafia's frustration, the Jabberwocky's right leg had grown back, becoming even deadlier than before with new razor-sharp claws. Not only was it immune to even the most powerful forms of demonic powers, but the demonic beast also had a strong regenerative ability that allowed it to heal instantly from their attacks. At the same time, there's no chance that they could focus all of their firepower at the Jabberwocky, as it also had the power to spawn an army of smaller versions of itself to target them on the ground. If they weren't some of the strongest devils the Devil faction had ever known, they would have been completely overrun at this point. Grafia-san. Roygun Belphegor, a beautiful young woman appearing in her 20s with long and wavy cherry blossom hair and two horns protruding from her head, spoke to her in a hurried tone as she arrived at Grafia's side and informed the strongest queen in a hurried tone the Bandersnatch is currently heading this way. What? Grafia asked in shock, and looked to see the towering figure of the Bandersnatch, which was currently engaging the combined peerages of Roygun and Daihauser Belial, the current emperor of the raiding game, slowly making its way toward them. To make matters even worse, it appeared that the Jabberwocky had sensed its brother's presence, and began to slowly make its way toward it as well. We cannot allow them to group up with each other. The silver-haired queen decided, quickly coming up with a plan of attack. We will. Grafia, can you hear me? Before Grafia could finish giving the order, she was interrupted by the voice of Surzex Lucifer coming from the communication magic circle on her wrist. "Yes, I can hear you, Surzex-sama." Grafia answered as Roygun used her crack ability to defend the silver-haired woman from a group of anti-monsters, allowing him to converse with their Mao. "Now is not the time to. You and the others need to get out of there right now, Grafia." "What are you saying, Surzex-sama?" the silvered-haired queen asked in disbelief. "How can we?" "Trust me, Grafia." Surzex once again interrupted her as he said, his tone holding a strange sense of excitement within them that Grafia could detect. "You will understand why when you see them." "Them?" she repeated in wonder, before she and everyone else in the area were covered in a blinding flashlight and heard a rumbling noise that gave them the impression of something the size of the two gigantic beast monsters landing on the ground. The Jabberwocky suddenly stopped its advancement and looked up just to be punched in the face by a gigantic metal mace, causing it to stumble back for the first time ever. Roaring angrily, the Jabberwocky then lunged itself at its attacker, only for them to launch themselves into the air to dodge, their back opening up to reveal a set of rocket thrusters that increased their jumping height, before coming down with a full swing of the mace, smashing the monster down with an earth-shaking smash. "Surzex-sama, this is..." Grafia said slowly, recognizing the appearance of Jabberwocky's opponent. "Is Naruto-sama." The crimson-haired Mao did not say anything in response to her, but his silence was enough of an answer to Grafia and everyone in the area, as they stood there and started up at the 150 feet tall robotic form of the Grandmaster at Arms champion of the League Jax, which was given the story of the greatest weapons master in all the land, a man who had been itching for a proper fight before he was given an indomitable weapon called the Avalon, a gigantic mech that were created based on his image. To fight against the invasion of gigantic monsters known as the Leviathans, giving birth to the being that was known as Mecha Kingdom Jax. Wow. Grafia-san, this is... Roygun, much like everyone in the area, were in utter shock and awe at the sight of the black and white Avalon mech. "Yeah. Let's go. This is the best day ever." Just before anyone could say something to the second-ranking competitor of the official rating game, they heard an overly excited squeal from the mech. "Seek Verasan, please calm down," Naruto said with a nervous smile. In his hand was a hologram construction of the mech's weapon. He was currently standing within Mecha Kingdom Jax's cockpit/control room with a completely out-of-character Seekvera Agars acting as his assistant in controlling the mech, since he needed to press a lot of buttons if he wanted to use Jax's empowered abilities in this mecha form. How did he end up getting paired with her while he wanted Rias to be his assistant? Naruto had no idea, but her knowledge about mech-related stuff as well as enthusiasm allowed the Agars heiress to work with him really well. "Sorry Uzumaki-kun," Seekvera said while laughing and scratching the back of her head, looking more and more like a kid in the candy store with each passing seconds. "I'm just really excited that I got to be in an actual mech, that's all." "Right." Naruto could only chuckle as the Agars heiress turned back to look at the Jabberwocky on the screen in front of them. As it slowly got up, the damage that they had done on its body started healing, albeit a little slower than before due to them not using demonic powers. Despite being the pilot of his Avalon in its story, Jax had become the very mech itself when Naruto used his balance breaker, multiverse transcendence on him after donning his weapons teacher with the robotic appearance of his Mecha Kingdom skin, resulting in an empty body of motionless metal. Still, it did not take it long for them to discover that there was a control room inside the mech that could be used to pilot the Avalon, in a manner similar to the control room in Pacific Rim Uprising, but with one pilot instead of two, and Naruto needed no second thought to volunteer to be the pilot, with no one questioning him since he was the summoner. However, with how complicated the control was and also the fact that there was no actual manual, and no time for them to waste, Azazel had proposed the idea of an assistant, who would help him with all the buttons and levels inside the cockpit as he focused on fighting the anti-monsters physically, with the Avalon mimicking his movements with only a slight delay as he stood on the control platform. One sentence led to another and Seekvera Agars had become his assistant, joining him in the cockpit of Mecha Kingdom Jax as they headed into battle against the kaiju-level anti-monsters. But the best thing was that they were not the only ones in this fight. "Naruto, we are coming in," Naruto heard his girlfriend's voice, and looked to the side to see the Avalon known as Mecha Kingdom Leona charging at the Jabberwocky with its own versions of the Radiant Dawn's Shield of Daybreak and Zenith Blade in her hands, the latter of which was driven into the rib of the Jabberwocky upon reaching it, making the anti-monster roar before it violently swung its massive claw at her. Kiba Yuto, who was controlling MK Leona with Rias acting as his assistant, quickly raised the shield up and used it to block the demonic beast's claw hand. Despite being knocked back several yards and almost trampling over a building, they quickly recovered and got ready to re-engage. On the other side of the city, having just arrived and currently blocking the Bandersnatch's path toward its big brother was Mecha Kingdom Set, being piloted by Serord Bale himself and his queen Keisha Abaddon, and Mecha Kingdom Garen, with a very excited Azazel acting as its pilot while a reluctant Valley worked as his assistant. Despite the fact that there wasn't much work for him to do, as Azazel just came in swinging his sword much like how Garen did it in the game with his judgment ability while laughing like a maniac. Thanks to Ophis, who was currently sitting on a chair behind Naruto in the corner of the cockpit of MK Jax, supplying him with an incredible amount of raw power that she had an infinity amount of, the blonde was able to use his balance breaker on not just 1, 2, but 4 of his champions in their Mecha Kingdom skins in total and maintaining them all at the same time, giving them over to his friends to control to maximize their chances of winning. Since Draven, who also had a Mecha Kingdom skin, had already been summoned by another summoner for a match on Summoner's Rift after Naruto against Cao Cao was over, allowing him and the other champions to return to Runeterra, the blonde couldn't bring into this battle the final Avalon. Still, Azazel and the other 2 devil leaders, as well as Odin, believed that 4 giant mechs would be enough to fight the 2 anti-monsters that themselves could easily destroy the entire city before matching on to do the same thing to the entire continent. Any more and there would be nothing left for Reykjavik at the end of the battle. Alright guys, let's do this. Naruto spoke through the communication link between all 4 Avalon before he and Kiba fought the Jabberwocky together as Serord and Azazel finally attacked its smaller, but no less formidable brother, bringing their fists and weapons upon the 2 demonic beasts. Kiba's techniques in swordsmanship allowed him to wield the giant Zenith Blade with grace and deadly precision, while Serord's mastery of martial arts was a perfect match to Set's immensely powerful close-range abilities. At the same time, having been taught by the Grandmaster at Arms himself to use a vast variety of weapons, Naruto had no problem fighting with his Avalon's giant mace, which was actually another form of Jax's lantern, the last light of Icathia. Azazel, meanwhile, was just happy that he was chosen to pilot Mecha Kingdom Garen. Down below, the smaller anti-monsters tried to attack the Avalon mechs, several of which had already either latched onto their feet, or discharged concentrated beams of light at them to assist their creators. Before they could cause any serious damage, however, they were quickly dealt with by combined forces of the Devil faction and the Valkyries, who were now working together to assist the 4 Avalon on Graphia's order. Hey guys, is it just me or these things don't seem to care about us all that much? Azazel decided to ask as he chopped the Bandersnatch's tail off with a swing of his Avalon sword. It grew back after a few seconds, and with an angry roar, and an attack that looked like it tried to push the 2 mechs away, the demonic beast continued to advance toward its big brother, which were starting to get more and more difficult to deal with than before with how violent it had become. They were trying to group up before we arrived, so maybe that's why. Naruto answered as he entered a defensive stance, while spinning the mace above his head, generating a force field that blocked and parried all of the Jabberwocky's beams of light that were fired at him and Mecha Kingdom Leona. It had begun to rain heavily now, but the battle between mechs, devils and Valkyries against the anti-monsters didn't seem to cool down for even a bit. Then we must stop them before that happens. Naruto shouted as Sekvera activated the thrusters on MK Jax's back, allowing it to jump really high up before coming down to bring down the entire weight and swinging force of his mech's mace down upon the Jabberwocky's head, with Kiba coming it with a full swing of MK Leona's sword. The Jabberwocky roared angrily before swinging its tail at the mech, sending it flying across the city before Naruto could control it to pick itself up, at the same time catching Sekvera before she could fall as their mech shook violently. I don't know if you have noticed, kid. Azazel shouted into the communication line as he struggled to hold back the biting mouth of the Bandersnatch with his mech's broadsword, before Serorg and Keisha charged in with MK set and punched it away. The mech's idea is cool and all, but against enemies with strong regenerative power like this, and if we want to take them down before our fight destroys the entire city, what we need is something that can destroy them faster than they can generate. Blunt forces are not going to do it. This isn't Pacific Rim. These things seem to be able to even grow back their heads. I don't suppose these mechs have some kind of fancy blaster or something similar, do they? I don't think they do. Parrying a fireball, Naruto answered through gritted teeth, but he trusted Azazel's judgment on the matter. Sikvara-chan, can you check? He asked her, though he's pretty sure that among the 4 mechs he had summoned, and even Mecha Kingdom Draven himself, none had an energy blaster. We don't have anything, Uzumaki-kun. Sikvara answered after she had gone through the list of functions on the screen in front of her, having gotten pretty familiar with the control at this point. We have nothing here as well. Keisha answered. Well, we neither. Azazel answered in Vala's place, after the White Dragon Emperor had turned the scene to show it to him. We have the solar flare, but... Rias answered and activated the ability, allowing Kiba to raise MK Leona's sword up and launch an aircraft into the air that then fired down a concentrated beam of light upon the Jabberwocky. While the beam did deal some damage to the super demonic beast, it only served to make the Jabberwocky even angrier and start to wreak havoc by firing its own beams of light in every direction. Yeah, I thought so. It's not strong enough. What do we do? Naruto asked in frustration. We can keep fighting them, but the city. Summon Aurelian Soul. Every pilot standing inside their respecting Avalon mech became silent when Ophis spoke up from behind Naruto, looking directly at the blonde who glanced at her from over his shoulder. Summon Aurelian Soul. She repeated in her usual calm and emotionless tone, even though the battle outside was getting more and more intense with every second. I will give you even more power if you need. Summon Aurelian Soul and destroy them. Naruto became lost for words at that, and he could only stare at Ophis as she looked right back at him, tilting her head to the side with a thoughtful expression, as if she was wondering why he didn't just do that from the very beginning. Rias and Kiba could understand his silence, but the others did not and ended up pushing it even further. Yeah, with Ophis' power, you should have more than enough power to summon Aurelian Soul, right Naruto? Azazel asked. Yeah, with Aurelian Soul, these 2 monsters shouldn't be a problem, right? Sikvara asked, before she noticed the look on his face and couldn't help but ask, what's wrong, Uzumaki-kun? You can't summon him, can you? Ophis asked, speaking up out loud the very thing everyone outside the 3 members of the Occult Research Club had already figured out. Naruto stared at her for a long moment, before he turned back when the Jabberwocky slammed into him. It took the blonde a moment to regain his mech's balance as Kiba charged in with the shoulder tackle to push the super demonic beast away. I can summon him. Making up his mind, Naruto decided to tell Ophis the whole truth, turning fully around to look at her. I can summon him into this world. It will be as easy as a snap of my fingers with all the power you are giving me right now, Ophis. But I can't control him. Naruto continued. Aurelian Soul promised to destroy this world if I ever summoned him again. The crown he is wearing, the very thing that is preventing him from destroying Runeterra, it doesn't work here in our world. It won't stop him from doing what he wants to us. Because of his past experience with the aspects, he also doesn't want to lend me any of his power to fight in a temporal form like Ari or Evelyn. He finished, taking a deep breath before he looked at Ophis apologetically. I'm sorry, Ophis, for lying to you that I have the power to help you. If you want to go back to Chaos Brigade, then I understand and won't try to stop you. The Ouroboros dragon god fumed, but to Naruto's surprise, she did not look like she was about to just stand up and walk away or angry, not even in the slightest. It was as if everything he had just told her was a minor setback to what she had had in her mind. Naruto, can you summon Lulu or Ash and use your balance breaker on their cosmic skin? Azazel suggested, an idea coming to his mind as he remembered a certain skin that he had seen before while trying to play League. Aren't they the same as Aurelian Soul in those skins? Yes, but I can't, Azazel-sensei. Naruto answered while shaking his head. I don't know why. Maybe my sacred gear hasn't reached that state yet, but when I tried to use my balance breaker on them, nothing happened. The same thing happened to the dark stars and the more omnipotent skins. I see, so there are limitations for you, at least for the time being. Azazel nodded his head in understanding. Finally, Office spoke up, looking at Naruto as she uncrossed her arms. If I am not mistaken, you cannot take your champion's power against their will, right? Yeah, and I have also promised myself to never force them to do anything I don't like. Naruto said with a nod. I see, so the problem with you and Aurelian Soul is that he doesn't want to help you, correct? Yes. Then I can wait till he does, no problem. Was the reaction that was shared by everyone who was listening to their conversation, as Naruto looked at the Ouroboros dragon god in shock and amazement. What? I can wait. Office repeated her words before she continued casually. I have waited thousands of years for the chance to return to my home, so 1,000 or 10,000 more won't make that much of a difference to me. How long can you devils live, by the way? It's hard to tell, Office-sama, but we all can live for approximately 10,000 years or maybe even more than that. Seek Vera was the one who answered that question for him, her tone very serious. Unlike how it had been the past few minutes, we all have exceptionally long lifespan, you see. Great. Office nodded her head at the Agar's before she looked at Naruto. What I am saying is that if Aurelian Soul refuses to help you now, what says he will keep doing so in the future? Maybe next year? Or the next? Or the next, She chanted while waving her fingers side to side in front of her in a very Kuroka manner, making Naruto wonder if she learnt how to speak like that from the mischievous black cat. And what says you can't use his power next year? Or the next? Or the next? What stops you from befriending him like how you befriended me and getting him to lend you his powers? What I am saying is that I can wait till the day you can wield Aurelian Soul's power. If you can't do it in your lifetime, then I will just have to create another Chaos Brigade in 10,000 years. I see. Naruto's sweat dropped, not knowing if he should laugh or feel worried that Office could just create another group of terrorists to help her get what she wanted. Still, he couldn't help but smile while feeling as if a massive weight had been lifted off of his shoulders. The blonde had to admit that since the moment she decided to come with him, and especially after Cao Cao and his group showed up to challenge him for Office, he had been on edge, feeling worried about the way Office would react when she found out that he couldn't help her the moment she got bored of him and his world and just wanted to come back to hers. Plus, I quite like this friendship thing I have developed with you and the others. So, I will stay for as long as it still interests me. Office said finally as she leaned back on her seat. This world is fairly interesting, I must admit. What a lovely thing to hear, Office-sama. Azazel spoke up finally in an excited tone, lightening up the heavy atmosphere that had surrounded him and the young devils. Even Valley had had a look of worry on his face, but the governor of Grigori decided that now was not the time to bring it up. Now that it's settled, can we please get back to our current problem, guys? Because what the fuck is this Power Ranger Pacific Rim Uprising shit? It was then Naruto realized that all four Avalons were standing very close to each other, facing the Jabberwocky and Bandersnatch as they combined to become an even larger monsters, flesh mixing with flesh and bones snapping into each other to make an even larger ones, standing at 250 meter tall and towering over all four Mecha Kingdom mechs with all the deadly features of both demonic beasts. The smile he had had on his face while talking to Office completely disappeared, leaving only a look of shock as he looked at the anti-monster before him. There was a moment of silence as they stood there and stared up at the gigantic monster, which looked even scarier than how it was supposed to as bolts of lightning struck around it and created flashes of light. Down below, Graphia and the joined force of Devil Faction and Asgard all had a look of horror in their faces as they looked at the beast, which then unleashed a powerful roar that caused shockwaves and eruptions in every area of the entire land around them. Please tell me we can do that too? Finally, Azazel spoke up, breaking the silence with a nervous chuckle before he was smashed away by a giant pair of claws, the chest plate of his mech being completely torn apart before he was slammed into a mountain at least a mile away. Following up with its attack, the anti-monster began to rear its back while gathering a massive amount of fire in its mouth before it unleashed an enormous fireball at the three Avalons standing below it. Kiba tried his best to shield them from it, but the explosion alone was enough to send all three of them flying, requiring Graphia down below to unleash a powerful wave of freezing air to contain the explosion before it could destroy half of Reykjavik as a whole. Naruto, if you have anything more shocking or fantastic abilities to use, then now is the time for them. Serorg said as his mech stood up and ran at the monsters, both fists glowing with raw energy as he jumped into the air and delivered a powerful uppercut to the joined anti-monster, causing it to stumble back a single step before it lashed out at him, which then swiftly dodged in quick succession before its attacks could land. Kiba and Rias then came from the side with MK Leona, driving their sword into its side before slashing up, only for the wound to heal instantly before it swung its tail at their behind, smashing them away before firing a beam of concentrated light at the female mech. The Knight of Rias Gremory wasted no time to raise his shield up to protect them from the attack, while lying on the ground, with Rias activating Leona's MK Form Eclipse ability, causing the shield to open and generate a pinkish aura that surrounded them, but even with all that, they were still instantly driven into the ground, which shattered and broke around them as the anti-monster increased its power even further before Serorg and Naruto jumped in with their respective Avalon, delivering a devastating punch and a wide mace swing, but unfortunately it only made the anti-monster phase a little. We need Aurelian Soul, Naruto. Despite having the chest area torn apart and everything in the control cockpit blinking red, the Garen Avalon were fairly functional and could continue fighting, with Valen now donning his balance breaker scale mail and adding the battle from the outside. Didn't you hear what I said earlier? He said he would destroy our world if I summoned him again. Naruto shouted back as he desperately tried to fight the monster with Serorg. If you don't, this whole continent is as good as dead before the gods can stop this monster. Its power level has already gone off the charts now. Calm down and think, Naruto. Ria said in a soothing voice, speaking to Naruto, and at the same time trying to calm him down. Think, is there anything that we can offer a soul to get him to lend you even a little bit of his power? Think of Ophis, and how you were able to get her on our side. You understand League's lore better than anyone here, so think, Naruto. Hearing his girlfriend's voice, Naruto finally allowed himself to take a deep breath and thought about what she just said, what a soul wants. He wants to destroy Runeterra, that's for sure. Why? It was Ophis who asked that question, like how I want your help because you can return me to my home. Why did he want to destroy this Runeterra world? Because the aspects of Mount Tagan robbed him of his freedom. Naruto answered, pointing his hand at Ophis as an idea flashed into his mind, and they did that by tricking him to wear that crown. Guys, I have an idea, but I will need you guys to buy me as much time as you can. He shouted as he got down from the controlling platform and looked at Sikvera-san, can you take over for me? And me? The Agar's heiress pointed at herself in surprise, looking at the controlling platform with a forced smile. I don't know Uzumaki-kun. Before she could finish, Naruto had put his hands on her shoulders and spoke to her with a grin as she turned to look at him in surprise. This is everything you have ever wanted, right, Sikvera-san? He asked. This is your chance to ride on a real-life mech. Don't hesitate. Just do what you think is right. The young bespectacled woman looked at him unsurely for a second before she steeled her nerves and nodded his head. I will do it. With that said, she jumped onto the controlling platform and turned around to face the gigantic demonic beast with determination burning in her eyes, her arms reaching out to simultaneously control the mech's basic movements and activate many of its abilities at the same, having remembered the button's locations already. All units. Let's buy Naruto-kun as much time as we possibly can. You heard the commander. Azazel smirked as he picked up Garen's sword, which he dropped when the mech was sent flying away. Let's do this. And with that, he, Serorg and Kiba sent their Avalons at that gigantic demonic beast, bringing everything they got upon the monsters. Above, the gods of Asgard and even Odin had arrived and joined the battle, giving everything, they had to slow the monsters down as it continued to rampage through Reykjavik. More than half of the once beautiful city was now nothing more than a pile of rubbles. Before Sikvera sent MK Jax into the battle as well, she then lowered her hand down and created a time sphere just large enough for one person before telling Naruto, "You go into that sphere, Naruto-kun." Sikvera told him the flow of time in that sphere is much slower than outside. It should give you more time to do what you must. Naruto nodded his head gratefully at her, smiling as he prepared a new set of summoner rune on his jacket. "Thank you, Sikvera-san." "Call me Sikchan." Eh? Naruto looked at her in surprise, and he was also not the only one who made that sound. "Just do it." She gave him a firm glare, before turning the mech so that Naruto would fall into her time sphere. The blonde looked up and widened his eyes when he saw that Sikvera was moving very slowly in the real world outside. "All right, let's talk, you overgrown space dog." Naruto muttered as he assumed a mediating stance Shin had taught him, closing his eyes and concentrating on the celestial dragon. A telepathic connection was only possible if both parties agreed to form it, but he had talked face-to-face with Aurelian Soul once before after the raiding game against Razor. However, because he had done so while he was unconscious, Naruto actually had zero idea how the dragon could drag his consciousness into Runeterra to have a direct meeting like that, but it's time to find out if he could do that too. At first, nothing happened, making Naruto concentrate even harder. The new set of summoner runes, the rune of communication on the left sleeve of his jacket, glowed even brighter than it had been a second ago, before suddenly he couldn't feel or hear anything related to the outside world outside the time sphere anymore, as it was replaced by a dead silence before it was followed the scoff of a gigantic being, the very embodiment of the universe itself. Naruto opened his eyes and smirked when he saw himself facing the mighty celestial dragon that was known as the Star Forger, Aurelian Soul, whose size was so great Naruto had an impression he was looking at the galaxy itself, before the cosmic overlord leaned his head back, doing so like moving several galaxies away, and smirked at him, his tone deep and universe shaking as he spoke. "Foolish mortal, didn't I tell you that if you summon me, I will bring destruction down upon your world?" "Yes, but you didn't mention anything about not coming before you to ask for your help, Aurelian Soul." Naruto answered strongly and firmly, putting a brave front in front of the Star Forger. "I want you to lend me your power, so I can defeat the monster rampaging in my world and save it." "Why should I? Not to mention, that's your world's problem, not mine, or it will be when I am done breaking it down particle to particle." "I know, which is why you will want to hear me out," Naruto said as he held up his hand. "Please lend me your power. Even a little bit should be more than enough. Please help me save my world, and I will talk to the champions of Mount Tagan about releasing you from that crown." Aurelian Soul then laughed, so loud that it felt like the entire universe itself shook with his laughter before he spun around and flew away, forcing Naruto to will himself to follow the celestial dragon. Strangely enough, despite the speed the Star Forger was moving across the sky of Runeterra, Naruto had no trouble following him. "Please, you are our only hope right now," Naruto shouted at the dragon, making him turn his eyes to look at him. "What makes you think those fools on Mount Tagan will even consider your words? What makes you think that they will stop stealing my power to give rise to the new Ascended?" "I don't know, but I will still try it." "Has any summoner ever tried to help you before, Star Forger?" Naruto asked him loudly and smiled mentally when Aurelian Soul once again looked at him. "I will do it. I will help you regain your freedom on the condition that you lend me your power to help me save my world, and you don't destroy Runeterra when you're free from your shackles. I know you won't like it, but you have to understand that it is the reason why no summoner before me has ever tried to help you." "You think you can show up here and demand something like that from me? Little child? Why can I not? I am running out of options anyway." Naruto replied with a shrug before he continued. "Plus, I have promised myself to help all of my champions with all the problems that they have however I can, so as long as it is within my power, Aurelian Soul, I will help you. I will not hesitate to do it. I will help you return to the sky, so that you can return to do what you love most, creating new beautiful stars and taking care of them." Aurelian Soul merely looked at Naruto for a second before he snickered, the corner of his mouth curving up into a smirk as he stopped and allowed Naruto to float back to his front and face him, speaking up in amusement. "You are a weird summoner, you know." Naruto grinned, as he put hand on his chest and spoke up loudly and proudly. "Of course, I am not like one of those old geezers who can only summon one champion at a time. I am the League Summoner after all. No, I mean to say that you are annoying like a bug." Naruto paled when the celestial dragon just casually constructed a gigantic fly swatter and swung it at him, making him hold his head and brace for the impact, only for it to pass through him harmlessly. "Yes, just like a bug that I cannot kill, or that little kid who always shows up here once every few weeks to annoy the hell out of me. I should try to kill you here, Naruto Uzumaki. There are more ways than just a casual fly swatter, but consider that I can't seem to do it, and you won't stop bugging me until I give you my power. I will give you a fragment of what you came for." Naruto's eyes lit up at that, as a sun-like orb appeared in the palm of his hand. "The fools of Mount Tagan will not listen to you, even with your status as a summoner, so don't bother trying to talk to them." And with that, the Star Forger flicked the orb that seemed so little to him at Naruto, who widened his eyes at the sheer size of it. Despite it being a perfect replica of the actual sun, Naruto saw only darkness when it collided with him before he snapped his eyes open in the real world and launched himself out of Sekvera's time sphere as well as the MK Jack's mech like a fast, speeding bullet, breaking the sound barrier before he stopped suddenly in the air. Standing there like beneath his feet was solid ground as every breathing being in the area stared at him with their eyes widening in shock. "What manner of power is this?" a Norse god asked in shock as he could only stare at Naruto in amazement. The blonde's jacket had disappeared, leaving his arms fully exposed that were just like his legs, from the elbows and knees down, had the appearance like that of a starry night sky. At the same time, his eyes were glowing an ethereal blue light similar to that of some of the gods in the area who were using their full powers, but it was hard to tell if the blonde was at his peak, or even anywhere close to it just yet. "Move." Naruto alerted the force of Asgard even before it happened. The gigantic super demonic beast then unleashed an animalistic roar before it swung its massive claw hand at the blonde, causing the gods who were in that direction to quickly move out of the way to dodge, but Naruto merely raised his hand and stopped it before it could even touch him with just a single thought. It felt like he could destroy it with just a wave of his hand, unleashing his cosmic power in the form of planetary constructions, but Naruto knew the effect would be devastating to the already destroyed city of Reykjavik, so he decided to pick another option. With another thought, the gigantic super anti-monster was completely immobilized, with Naruto then turning his hand around with one finger pointing up to lift it off of the ground, making it fly up until it went past the rain clouds before he went after it, flying up by just looking up. "Where are you taking it?" Valle asked as he caught up to Naruto. "Somewhere it can't regenerate back." The summoner answered simply before he and the anti-monster left Valle behind and took off from the Earth's atmosphere, flying past the moon while Naruto could still breathe normally even while he was in space. He then continued to fly until he reached the sun, the perfect sphere of hot plasma at the center of the solar system, and merely tossed the beast into it, having gotten the idea from Aurelian Sol's sun-like orb before he turned around and returned to Earth before he ran out of Asal's power, which already felt dangerously low, not bothering to stay to watch as the gigantic super demonic beast was burnt to ash and reduced to literally nothingness. And just like that, the Battle of Reykjavik was over. Chapter 30. It had been 2 days since the Battle of Reykjavik. The reconstruction of the city had already begun, well, for what still needed to be rebuilt anyway. Much of the beautiful capital of Iceland had been almost entirely repaired and rebuilt, or returned by Naruto himself, using the power of time of his champion Xylian that had been empowered by the remaining cosmic power of Aurelian Sol. A citywide memory spell had also been used, altering the memories of Reykjavik citizens about the supernatural battle that had taken place, so they might live their life in peace without needing to worry about anything from then on. In general, Asgard had taken care of everything, so that the whole normal world itself would only remember the Battle of Reykjavik as a natural disaster that had hit the beautiful city. Since earthquakes happened all the time in Reykjavik, it did not take long for the citizens to return to their normal daily life, settling back quite quickly much to Naruto's amazement. "Say Naruto-kun. The blonde did what he was requested to do, allowing Momo Hanakai to put another chili-loaded French fry into his mouth, grinning as he ate it before taking a bite from his hamburger. It was thanks to the city's quick recovery that Naruto was able to keep his promise to Momo and take her out on the date that they had talked about before the Battle of Reykjavik. At the moment, the two were currently having lunch at a local restaurant, one of the places in the city that weren't completely destroyed in the fight against the anti-monsters. Naruto wasn't entirely sure if it was one of the buildings he had reverted back to its original state with time power, but considering the weird shape of the roof, it's very possible that it was not. Nevertheless, the owner of the restaurant didn't seem to mind as he served them, the only two customers currently, as both chef and waiter of his own business, as the employees had all been allowed to take the day off to take care of their home and families. "Here, you try some out too, Momo-chan," Naruto offered, making Momo blush a little before smiling nonetheless at him. The previous night he had sent some texts to Momo asking if she would like to have a date at another time since there wasn't much for them to do, but she still insisted that they would still do it as they had planned, because she didn't mind as long as she could spend time with him. In the end, they had spent the entire morning after breakfast helping out and lending their hands to whoever needed it, and went only to the aquarium to have some fun time for themselves. Although Naruto knew he could give her a much better time if there were more places for them to go to and have fun, Momo seemed like she had been having a lot of fun, and it's all that mattered to him. Ah. Momo repeated what Naruto just did while feeling all excited and happy. Before she could eat the fry, however, her eyes then caught a glimpse of crimson before she tried to look closer, and saw Rias Gremory standing with the rest of the occult research club, who were peeking at them from behind a building. Although the Gremory heiress didn't look displeased or anything, appearing to be someone who got dragged along by everyone else. Next to her was Akino Himejima, the Nadeshiko, who Momo idolized even more than Rias, because she was the very personification of an idealized Japanese woman Momo herself wanted to become. The black-haired queen was wearing a hat and sunglasses, looking over to them from behind the telephone pole, but she had a playful smile on her face while Asia Argento, who was standing a little behind her, had tears in her eyes. Kaneko Tuju looked neutral as always, even though she surprisingly had a slight pout, something that she shared with Ravel Phoenix. If the group did not already stick out enough, then there was a short person wearing a paper bag over his head to conceal his face from view standing next to Kiba Yudo, who was the only one dressed normally beside Rias. "Naruto-kun. Don't worry about them, Momo-chan." Naruto answered her with an amused chuckle before Momo could even finish asking that question, knowing very well who the white-haired beauty was looking at outside the restaurant. "How did you? Rias sent me a text earlier." The blonde explained with a gesture to his phone that he had placed on the table next to his cup of orange soda. "She said she would try her best to stop the others from interrupting our date, but I guess she's not having so much luck, huh?" He asked with another chuckle, before turning around and waving his hand to Rias and the other members of the Occult Research Club, making them all look at him in surprise before hurriedly going back to their hiding places, with the only exception being the president and Kiba himself, who waved apologetically back at Naruto before leaving as well to see the others. "Yeah, please don't mind them." The blonde grinned as he turned back to Momo, who gave him a playful look as she went back to her meal. "You sure that you aren't trying to build a harem, Naruto-kun?" The white-haired girl asked with a small smile as she folded her arms on the table and leaned toward him to ask, "'Cause I'm pretty sure that I saw more than one glare of jealousy out there." "Again, Momo-chan, I am not trying to build a harem or anything," Naruto answered while chuckling nervously before he decided to ask the question he had been wondering ever since the talk that he had with Momo before the Battle of Reykjavik. As looked back at Momo, "You don't mind? Honestly, I'm just happy that you decided to approach me first, Naruto-kun." Momo answered, "I know that you are dating Ria-senpai, but if she's cool with you dating me, then I guess it's only fair for the both of us if I feel the same. So yeah, I don't mind. We live in a society where harem is a secretly accepted practice after all." "Are you sure that you didn't spend too much time around Issei, Momo-chan?" Naruto asked suspiciously with a playful tone, causing Momo to break out in a fit of giggle as she hid her mouth behind the back of her hand. Just try to get comfortable with the idea, Naruto-kun, because I have the feeling that Ria-senpai and I are not going to be the only ones ending up falling for you. Naruto said nothing for a few seconds, but he couldn't help but nod his head at her words. Drake. Please come in. Hearing that after knocking twice on the door, Naruto turned the doorknob and pushed it open to walk into the room with Rias, who had been called to the meeting along with her boyfriend. Azazel, Surzex and Michael, who had just arrived this morning, were standing around the room with Sona Citri and the other young kings who had participated in the Battle of Reykjavik. There was also Odin sitting on a chair in the room while his bodyguard, the white-haired Valkyrie, whose name Naruto had learnt to be Rosweiss, stood behind him. Naruto-kun, Rias-chan. Surzex greeted them with a warm smile, as the other leaders acknowledged them with nods. Sup brat? Odin greeted him with a small smirk, and Naruto nodded his head at the old god in return. Now that Naruto-kun and Rias-chan are here, let's begin this meeting, shall we? Azazel suggested, standing next to a table with a box on top of it. Around the room, everyone nodded their heads in agreement. First, we would like to thank you all here as well as your servants for defeating the hero faction in the battle that had taken place in this city a couple of days ago. Surzex began as Odin gave a smile. For the time being, the group has officially been dissolved, its surviving leaders and members captured and currently under the custody of Indra. Who? Naruto asked before he could stop himself. Indra, king of the Hindu gods and lord of heaven. Azazel was the one who gave that answer before continuing, his tone showing his disliking of the aforementioned Hindu god. We have reason to believe that he's the one who has been supporting the hero faction, even though he claimed that it was them that was manipulating him. We've long suspected that Indra was gathering pawns he could use to wage war against Shiva, the Hindu god of destruction, who's among the top 10 most individuals in the entire world. Azazel paused for a second and allowed the information to sink in, as they all looked fairly concerned at the prospect of war between two powerful gods, knowing very well how something like that could affect their world. So, is he a member of Chaos Brigade, Azazel-sensei? Sona asked, speaking up in a serious tone. Quite possibly, but at the same time it's very hard for me to tell unless we somehow manage to catch him red-handed. His cocky attitude wasn't really helping us much either. As much as I hate the guy, we can't just accuse him of being a terrorist. Azazel answered before he reached out with one hand and tapped the box next to him with his knuckle plus. He also gave us this as an act of goodwill, and considering the item inside, I doubt he will just give away something so valuable so easily if he really wants to build an army to wage war against Shiva. Yes, despite being a god of war and a very arrogant man who only thinks of it, Indra is quite a benevolent god. Yes, he might be supporting the hero faction, but I don't think he approved the evil deeds they had done during the Battle of Reykjavik, which was another reason why we chose to hand them over to him. It's also the best course of action that we don't make another enemy out of a god. Surzex added in and everyone but Odin and Rosweiss nodded their heads in agreement. Obviously, being the leader of an entire pantheon himself, Odin wouldn't feel too worried if he became the enemy of another. What about Hades? Naruto asked, remembering the Grim Reaper Pluto. From what he had heard, Pluto was an ultimate-class Grim Reaper under Hades' direct command, so it wouldn't be too surprising if the Lord of the Realm of the Dead himself was involved somehow in the Grim Reaper's sudden appearance at the battle, as worrying and terrifying as it could be having someone like him as their enemy. Like Indra, it is very possible that Hades is in league with the Chaos Brigade, even though he has denied sending Pluto himself to aid the hero faction in the attempt to kill Naruto and reclaim Ophis. It's not like we can just brag into his realm and ask him that face to face either unless we want to start a real war, but we will be keeping an eye out for him from now on. If he's really with Chaos Brigade, then he will be a much deadlier threat than even Cao Cao himself. Azazel answered as he crossed his arms. Speaking of Ophis, it appears that she will be in your care from now on, Naruto-kun, Rias-chan. Surzex spoke, making Rias nod her head at her brother. You can trust us on that one, Surzex-sama. Naruto grinned. Leaving a dragon god in the care of youngsters, what has the world come to? Odin chuckled humorously, speaking up for the first time during the entire meeting though, I highly doubt that she will bother with anyone else but you kids. She seems to be enjoying your guys' company the most, it seems. Of course, Chaos Brigade will no doubt try to take her back again, but after losing Chow Chow and almost the entire hero faction, they will have to think twice before launching an attack of that scale again in the near future. Surzek stated before he looked at Naruto, and Rias Grafia will continue to stay with you too. Not that I doubt your strength, but at least with her, we will have an even better chance of keeping Ophis from being taken away. Naruto nodded his head. He didn't mind continuing to have Grafia around. She's pretty much family at this point anyway. What about Valley and his team, Surzek-sama? What is going to happen to them? Naruto couldn't help but question. He had talked to Surzex about it after the battle, and the crimson-haired Mao had promised to take care of it with the higher-ups of the devil faction, many of whom wished for Kuroka's execution because of the crime she had committed. Valley and the other members of his team have been pardoned for their alliance with Chaos Brigade, but none of them actually has a criminal record like Kuroka. We can't allow her to get away with what she did, but at the same time we can't risk angering the Ouroboros dragon god or losing her back to Chaos Brigade either. Surzex explained with a small sigh before continuing. Their loyalty is with Ophis, and it appears that they wish to continue to stay with her, so it appears that we will have no choice but to leave them in your care as well, Naruto-kun, Rias-chan. Hearing that, Naruto let out a breath of relief he knew he had been holding. On your request, Naruto-kun, an investigation will be carried out into Kuroka's case. Surzex explained, and Naruto glanced at the site to see Seek Vera looking directly at him. It would make sense for the Agar's heiress to be in charge of the case. If she really had a good reason to kill her master, and it's not because she's drunk of her own power like our assumption in the past, we need to find out what it is. Until then, she will be kept watched 24/7 at your home by Grafia. You can trust me on this one, Naruto-kun. I will carry out this investigation fairly. Seek Vera spoke in her normally calm tone. Thank you, Seek-chan. Naruto spoke to Seek Vera, making Ria snap her head alarmingly to the side to look at her boyfriend at the way the two had just addressed each other as the Agar's heiress smiled back at him in response, while the others just looked between the three in interest, with Odin having an amused smirk on his face. Naruto couldn't help but feel a cold chill running down his spine, and failed miserably to keep a straight face as one glanced over at Rias. Nonetheless, Luffy Pendragon and her brother Arthur will be staying with you, Kuroka and Ophis, at your home. Valley and the other members of his team have yet to decide where they will be staying, but we will make sure to keep them under surveillance. Surzek stated with a small chuckle, saving Naruto from continuing being glared at by Rias. But knowing his sister, she would not let her boyfriend escape that easily. I can take care of that. Azazel spoke up. I will work harder to keep Valley under control this time around, but considering that he has had his eyes set on Naruto, I doubt he will leave again anytime soon. The meeting continued on for another half an hour after that, with the leaders mostly discussing their next moves against Chaos Brigade and their possible associates, as well as the alliance with Asgard and Odin, who had come on the behalf of the Norse gods. They also had a small discussion about the future youth rating game tournament to showcase the new game mode, with Odin being invited to watch it with several other gods from different pantheons. It appeared that the preparation for the new game mode had also reached the final stage. Everything seemed to be going very smoothly for Rajuka and the organizers of Rating Game after Naruto had given them all the information that they needed to perfect their own version of the Field of Justice, something that Naruto was dying to see. Since the MSI had been cancelled, there's also no point for them to stay in Reykjavik any longer. It had been decided that they would leave for the underworld tomorrow morning, and would be staying there for the rest of the summer. Naruto might not be able to watch the MSI, but he knew that his first summer vacation as a devil was long from over. Chapter 32. It was the morning of the departure, and Naruto was currently helping Asia and Irina with their luggage, having no problem carrying them for the two girls with Zenobia as they walked into the train station, where the leaders of the devil factions and Asgard had joined force to set up a path that would take them to the underworld. From what he had heard from Momo, Sona and her peerage had already gone on ahead with their own train, while Sikvera and Seror just teleported back to their home in the underworld using teleportation magic circle. Apparently, it was a tradition for new devils to travel to the underworld for the first time by train, which would only take a couple of hours if they departed from a station in Japan. Now that they were in Iceland, it would probably take them at least half a day to get there. Oh goody, can't say that I am not looking forward to this trip, Naya. Please behave, Wani-sama. Grafia-san is looking at you. Kaneko spoke nonchalantly to her sister, who just turned her head and smiled playfully at the silver-haired maid. Grafia had joined them earlier this morning to keep watch on Kuroka, the still one of the most dangerous criminals in the underworld, but not that she seemed to care, as she had casually decided that she would be coming along with Ophis, who had gotten an honored invitation from Surzex and Serafal themselves, and Luffy as they go there with Naruto and the rest. But looking at the bright side, Kaneko was no longer trying to ignore her sister, and had started to openly talk to her, despite still acting annoyed at her mischievous antics. Naruto had no doubt that Kaneko had yet to forgive her sister for doing what she did, leaving her behind after murdering her master, but their relationship sure had gotten somewhat better. Naruto had also heard that Kaneko had asked her sister to train her in the art of senjutsu and yujitsu, showing that she too, liked him, had come to believe that the reason why Kuroka had killed her master wasn't because she was drunk with her own powers like everyone had assumed. On a side note, Gasper could be seen wearing a brown paper bag over his head, looking the creepiest while nervously hiding behind Akino as a curious Ophis tried to poke him with a stick. It had been another one of Kaneko's ideas, as according to her, if no one could hide his face from the world then he wouldn't be so afraid of everyone. Despite sounding rather weird and somewhat stupid, it worked marvelously, and allowed Gasper to travel with them without needing to hide himself in his box, which they would have to carry around with their luggage. "There's our train." Rias pointed her hand at the train that looked the most out of place in the small train station, but for some reason people seemed to be avoiding, and some even outright not even looking at it. It must be because of magic, Naruto thought. Nevertheless, the train was larger and longer than any train that Naruto had ever seen, with a beautifully crafted steam engine shimmering in the warm sunlight. The surface polished to a shine of red and gold, so clear that he could even see their own reflection on the glittering steel surface, even though the group was standing several meters away. The on-board service crew, who were dressed in crimson uniforms with the crest of the Gremory household, then helped them carry their luggage into the train, allowing Naruto and everyone to board the train, walking on plush red carpet as they stepped in. The inside of the train had dark red walls and the ribbed ceiling, and rather than having several chairs lining the sides like a normal train, there were numerous couches centered around tables, the kind one could expect from a fancy and high-class 5-star hotel, much like the private jet they had used to travel to Iceland. Rethuriing. The whistle blew and soon the train began to take off. Eventually, they split up into small groups, with Kuroka and Luffy sitting together. The older Nekisha wanted her sister to sit with her, but it seemed that Kaneko had a different idea as she waited for something. Asia, Zenobia and Irina of course, sat with each other and near Ophis, who had an entire couch for herself as she sat there alone playing video games on a gaming console. On the table in front of her was a box that people could put their money in if they wanted to make a wish to her. It was Kuroka's idea to help Ophis make some pocket money, since her divine power was so great that as a dragon god she could give blessings and make certain wishes come true if she was satisfied. Naruto had not tried it himself, but the church trio had, and all three claimed that it did work to a certain extent. Meanwhile, Naruto had found his seat in the center with Rias, Akino and Ravel, and the rest of their group, with the two Wani-sama of Koa Academy on either side of him. They were about to play a game of card with Kiba and Gasper, who had finally removed his paper bag mask, when suddenly Kaneko appeared and sat down on his lap, much to everyone's surprise and shock, especially Ravel, as she also had a look of annoyance on her face as she glared at the cat girl, but Kaneko just shrugged her off, and had a happy smile on her face as she got herself comfortable on Naruto's lap. With how happy and content she looked, Naruto knew it would be a crime if he tried to remove her from his lap, so he just let her sit there and smile apologetically to Rias, who had a sullen face as she let out a sigh, but not for very long. Akino, meanwhile, had an intimidating smile on her face as she looked at them, but Naruto completely missed it as the train moved through a dark tunnel, passing the barrier between worlds and entering the underworld. The hours passed idly spent chatting or playing games. Yumi, Irina, Zenobia and Asia eventually joined them in a game of cards, his little familiar proving herself to be a formidable player as she and Book beat them repeatedly. Eventually, having lost all the snacks that they used as bet money to the magical cat, Naruto ended up playing League with Kaneko, watching and giving him tips while still sitting on his lap, even teaching him how to jungle, as it was her main role in the game. With her advices, Naruto was able to finish his platinum promo with little trouble and continue to play till he got to Plat-I for the first time in his life after 7 straight hours of gaming, with the longest winning streak that he had ever had, only stopping for lunch break and tea break, something that Rias had to drag him, or else he would continue to sit there and continue until he's diamond. The road to challenger and then a pro player sure was long and difficult. "What are you doing, Azazel-sensei?" Naruto asked as he walked over to Azazel and sat down in front of him, watching as the governor of Grigori took out and placed several oddly-looking devices on the table in front of him. It was late in the afternoon and several members of the group had fallen asleep, with Kaneko and Ravel laying side by side on a couch, looking adorable as they slept together after another one of their usual quarrels. The church trio had also fallen asleep, resting while leaning against each other on another couch. Rias and Aquino meanwhile were playing a game of chess while talking about girl stuffs and making shopping plans during their stays in the underworld, so Naruto decided to not bother them. Ophis, on the other hand, was counting the money she had collected during the past few hours of the trip. With the amount she had gotten, Naruto had no doubt that Asia, Zenobia and Irina were not the only ones who had been making wishes to her. "Since I am having some free time, I decided to give some love to a certain hobby of mine," the duo-haired man explained with a grin before he made a box appear on the table in front of them. "You remember this?" Naruto nodded. It was the same box Azazel had shown him during the meeting with the leaders yesterday, the box that contained the gift Indra had given them. "Wanna guess what is inside?" Azazel asked in interest, as if he was expecting Naruto to give the correct answer even though he had zero idea what's inside. Naruto was about to ask Azazel if he wanted to surprise him, until he noticed the smile on the governor's face and decided to turn his attention back to the box as Azazel opened the locks. After a few seconds of just looking, as if the answer just came naturally to him despite not knowing how it did, Naruto looked at teacher and answered. "True Longinus." It was not a question. Azazel nodded before he casted a spell and created a barrier around them, a barrier that would prevent holy power from getting out and alerting the devils in the train car with a sense of dread. Once done, the governor then opened the box and turned it around, showing Naruto the broken pieces of what used to be the Spear of Destiny, the Holy Spear of the Setting Sun, and the first as well as the most powerful Longinus that had given name to the type of sacred gears with the powers to destroy the world. The sight of the spear alerted those who were awake, but Azazel just waved them off dismissively as he spoke to Naruto after making a gesture toward Ophis with his head. "Obviously, I began looking into these things because I wanted to gather enough power to deal with her, but since she's on our side now, I guess there's no need for me to continue gathering these gods-killing objects anymore. Still, there's still so much we can learn from them, so Surzex and Michael let me keep it after we got it from Indra." Azazel explained as he picked up the broken lower half of the spear. "I have run a number of tests on this thing, but..." He then looked at Naruto and extended the broken piece toward him. "Here, grab it." "You sure?" Naruto asked cautiously as he eyed the spear. He knew that the broken rod wouldn't have the same level of holy power as the blade itself, but it's still the most powerful sacred gear in the world and the ultimate weapon against devils for a reason. "Yeah, worst-case scenario, you will only experience immense pain like there are millions of microscopic blades cutting into every cell of your body." Naruto just gave him a blank look, making Azazel laugh humorously before waving his hand in front of his face as he said, "I'm kidding." "Geez. Relax, kid. You have been cut by the spear itself before. You know it's not that bad." The governor of Fallen Angels grinned before he continued to push the rod toward Naruto. "Come on, take it. For the sake of science?" Naruto just looked at Azazel unsurely for another second before nodding, reaching his hand out to grab the broken rod of the spear. Almost instantly, a strange feeling washed over him and Naruto widened his eyes in surprise when he saw arcs of lightning appearing along the rod, forcing Azazel to take his hand back as he looked at the piece in amazement. "I was right," Azazel said excitedly as he grabbed a scanning device and used it on Naruto. "No wonder why the two pieces just don't disappear." "What do you mean?" "Well, normally for a sacred gear, when its wielder dies it will move on to the next person that it chooses at random. There are spells that can prevent that from happening, or extracting the sacred gear directly from the current host," Azazel answered as Naruto looked at the broken piece in his hand. "But anyway, it appeared that the usual process didn't happen to the spear. It has yet to go back to the system or choose its next wielder." "Huh? Why?" Naruto asked in surprise. He wouldn't say that he knew everything about these gods' artifacts, but he had done some research on them back when he first learned about his Runeterra arsenal to find out exactly what it was. Of course, his effort had been fruitless, but it had given him some knowledge on the subject, so he knew what Azazel was talking about. "I don't really know. Maybe it's because the spear's broken," the governor answered, gesturing his hands to the piece in Naruto's hand and the one still in the box, "but I do not think that's the case, because both pieces seem to be fully functional when I scan them." "Both? You mean this thing has its own power?" Naruto asked in surprise. "Originally, no. I am sure that you know the rod itself is extremely durable, but all of the spear's powers, including the 7 treasures Cao Cao had used against us, come from the tip that has been soaked in and blessed by the blood of Christ." He then gestured his hand to the rod, but as you can see right here, the rod seems to have gained a form of lightning power. "But why lightning?" Naruto said thoughtfully before widening his eyes in realization, remembering how he had killed Cao Cao with Orn's hammer in his Thunder Lord form and a bolt of lightning that came straight from the Norse god of thunder, Thor himself. "It can't be." Azazel nodded his head in confirmation before saying, "It got me thinking, since Orn is the god of forging, is it possible for his hammer to give new powers to weapons the same way it can break them down while being used by you under the right conditions? You can enhance the cutting power of Durandal and adding fire element into Kiba's holy demonic sword using Orn's hammer, correct?" "Yeah, but the enhancements won't last as long as Orn's though." "Whatever the case, this piece here," Azazel gestured his hand to the upper half of the spear in the box, "has all the holy powers of a normal true Longinus, the strongest Longinus tier sacred gear in existence, while the piece in your hand has the power of thunder and lightning in a way very similar to Mjolnir. It is as if the rod has become a sacred gear of its own that has chosen you as its wielder, since it is only reacting this way to you, even though you two share no connection that can be found normally between a person and their sacred gear." "But I can use it, right?" Naruto couldn't help but ask, looking at the lightning rod in his hand. "If my assumptions are correct, then yes, you should be able to use it normally." Azazel nodded his head with a small chuckle. "I have talked to both Surzex and Michael yesterday, and we all agreed that you should have it if it showed compatibility to you. Knowing it's in the box is the clear proof that it belongs to you. The rod might not look like much of a weapon now, but I am sure that you can give it to Orn and ask him to." "Nah, I don't think I will, Azazel-sensei. I don't need it." Naruto spoke up with a small smile, interrupting the governor as he raised an eyebrow in curiosity, but he did not look like he was surprised by Naruto's answer. "However, if I can decide what to do with it, then you can have it for your research. I am sure that it will do more good in your hands than mine anyway." "Are you sure, Naruto?" Azazel asked with an amused smile. "With it, I have no doubt that you can grow even stronger than you are now." "But that doesn't make it mine, sensei." Naruto smiled as he put the rod back into the box beside the spear before continuing, speaking from the bottom of his heart. "I am happy with Runeterra arsenal and the abilities that it gives me, especially the ones that allow me to summon the characters that I grew up loving to my side and wield their signature weapons into battles. To me, the joy of being able to fight with my champions is something that not even the strongest Longinus in existence can hope to match, so even if I accept it, I don't think I will ever favor using a lightning rod over the powers of my champions." Plus, I also don't think I will need something that I feel no sense of attachment to anyway, so it will be a waste if you leave it in my hands. Azazel just looked at Naruto for a second before he nodded his head at the blonde with a smile. Very well then. Don't regret it if I break this thing down to pieces, or see if I can give it to someone else, got it? Azazel asked, his lips curving into a smirk as he thought about all the research he could run on both pieces of true Longinus. Naruto just chuckled at the excited sacred gear fanatic, but nonetheless nodded his head in the end. A few hours later, the train eventually pulled into a station and slowed down to a stop. A glance out the window revealed at least a few hundreds of devils standing outside. All of them were staring expectantly at the train. Not only that, but there were also soldiers wearing formal crimson uniforms, maids and butlers standing in two single-file lines on either side of a long red carpet, their expressions filled with joy as they waited patiently and proudly for the young lady of the Gremory Devil household to arrive. Let's go, everyone. Ria spoke as she stood up from her seat and walked ahead of the group as they made their way to the front door, not forgetting to give Kuroka a look and telling her firmly, don't cause any trouble, got it? Naya the black-haired Nekisha mewed in response with a cheeky smile from under her hood while holding Yumi in her arms. Like how it was with Kaneko, the two got along very well. You are not coming, Azazel-sensei? Naruto couldn't help but ask when he saw Azazel still sitting at his table tickling the devices that he was using on the broken pieces of true Longinus. Nah, you kids go on ahead. The governor answered with a simple wave of his hand. I plan to continue through Gremory territory and go into Mao's territory. I have a meeting with Surzex and the others there after all. Say hello to my brother, Azazel. Azazel nodded his head at Ria's words, allowing her to continue leading the group toward the exit. The instant that she walked out of the train, a roar went up. Applause echoed across the station like thunder striking the ground. People cheered and whistled as soldiers aimed their guns at the sky and fired simultaneously. Above them, fireworks exploded, creating vivid colors to ignite the purple sky, brilliant soaring vermilion, golden and crimson flares bursting into flowers as a soldier riding atop a mythical creature flew across the sky and waved a flag. Welcome home, Ryosoju-sama. Wow, there are so many devils. Irina spoke in surprise and astonishment, looking at the crowd in front of her while Gasper, of course, was terrified by the large number of people and tried to hide behind Naruto. They're here to see Bucho. Kiba explained with a small smile as Rias raised her hand to wave at the crowd. You guys probably already know this, but she is a popular figure here in the underworld. This is also her family's territory, a rich land that is about the same size as Honshu in Japan. Everyone here is under the protection of Lord and Lady Gremory, so it's not surprising for them to love their daughter and the future heiress very much so. Talk about being a celebrity. Naruto replied with a small chuckle as the church trio looked at Rias with eyes sparkling in admiration, even the one who lacked the most common sense like Zenobia. Rias-sama. It's Rias-sama. You're so beautiful. We love you. People cried out and cheered in excitement as Rias walked past them with the grace and confidence of a noble young lady, having a smile that covered her entire face as she waved her hand to the maybe overly excited the crowd of young devils, and greeted the maids and butlers working for her family when they simultaneously bowed their heads to her. However, Naruto Uzumaki-sama. Naruto Uzumaki-sama. Over here. Naruto then widened his eyes when he heard someone shouting his name, and turned his head to see a female devil reporter trying to get back a guard with a cameraman standing behind her. Rias then raised a hand and the guards parted way for the female reporter, allowing her to take a step toward Naruto and begin her interview professionally after a quick introduction to herself. Mari of the Lilith Times. Uzumaki-sama, you have given us Lady Sona, who has risen to become one of the 10 most popular celebrities in the underworld in only a few months. In the battle against the group of terrorists known as Hero Faction in Iceland a few days ago, you had summoned the K/DA to your aid, and had them fought alongside you and Ryosoju-sama. Can we expect them to be the next to dominate the media industry of the underworld along with Lady Sona? The crowd immediately quieted down at that and all turned their heads from Rias to look at Naruto in expectation, showing just how much they wanted to hear the answer from him. Well, as much as I want K/DA to really be a real thing myself, there are copyright issues, and not to mention that convincing Kayase to perform like her virtual self won't be so easy. He answered honestly. His ability to change the appearances of his champions didn't make them completely different people, as they would retain their personalities and continue to stay true to who they really were. In Kayase's case it would be no different, even if he changed Kayase into her K/DA look. Under all those glorious and flashy makeovers and clothing she would still be the same battle-hardened warrior, a fearless and relentless hunter/predator who had managed to survive in the nightmarish realm the Void for almost 2 decades through sheer tenacity and strength of will alone. It would be extremely difficult for someone like Kayase to be able to sing and dance in front of a crowd of people like the others. The reporter then continued, moving her microphone back to her as she asked her next question. But if she agrees to be a part of the K/DA, will we be seeing them anytime soon? Perhaps in the upcoming Youth Devil rating game tournament to showcase the new game mode, for example? I'm sure I can arrange something special. The organizers of the rating game tournament want their advertising campaigns for the game mode to be successful after all. Naruto answered with a grin, making the crowd whisper excitedly to each other before he looked up and smiled at the young devils in the crowd. For the time being, please continue to support Sona. She has waited her whole life to be able to showcase her music to the world and be accepted for it. I don't know if I can speak for everyone here, Naruto-sama, but we will. The reporter spoke as the crowd cheered we will. Smiling brightly and gratefully, Naruto raised a hand and waved to the crowd before he continued to follow Rias on the red carpet, leading them out of the train station and to a large chariot that would take them to Gremory residence. It was just as Kiba had told them, the Gremory really did have a territory that was the size of Honshu in Japan, and very rich in nature, with mountains, plains, forests, and hills that seemed to stretch out for miles. The land also had a well-developed industry, with the Gremory large enterprise being a business enterprise that operated various successful business ventures in the underworld as well as the human world, where they had several travel agencies and hotel chains in various countries from east to west. The enterprise was also involved in the film industry, and was currently working as a partner of the Phoenix household, who were basically the boss of the media industry in the underworld. Eventually, the chariot pulled up to an enormous mansion. Having stayed there to recover from his state of demonic power exhaustion after the raiding game against Razor Phoenix and his peerage, Naruto was the only one who wasn't surprised to see Gremory residence, though it never ceased to amaze him. The layout of the mansion was a quadrangle with a courtyard in the middle. Outside at the entrance was a fountain with a circular flower bed surrounding it, with many gardens in the surrounding areas. Wow! Riaswani-sama is really a princess. She's really a princess. Asia gawked, while Irina and Zenobia shared a look of utter shock and amazement on their face as they started with wide eyes at the castle-like mansion upon exiting the chariot. Welcome home, Oju-sama. Another choir of maids and butlers chorused as Naruto and the others proceeded inside. The crimson-haired heiress smiled and nodded her head to them in return, while the newer members of the group looked around at the servants greeting them. With Grafia now taking the lead, they were then led into a large room that, like every other room in the mansion, held an appearance that was beyond exorbitant, even larger than the main room of his house, with soft crimson carpet under their feet as they walked across the room. The walls were decorated with a quite range of expensive-looking artworks, and a crystal chandelier hung from the exquisite ceiling. Era, Rias. Welcome home. A beautiful brunette spoke up as she walked down the stairs with a middle-aged, handsome-looking man with long crimson-red hair just like Rias that was tied in a loose ponytail with a black hairband. He also had a short and trimmed goatee, and donned himself in a formal, expensive suit that gave him refined aura. The brunette, meanwhile, was a beautiful woman who could have been mistaken as Rias's twin older sister, with the only notable difference being her hair color and a calming yet somehow mischievous aura about her as she looked at her daughter and her boyfriend. Oto-sama. Oka-sama. I have returned. Rhea smiled at her parents, with her peerage and Ravel lowering their heads to the Lord and Lady of Gremory Devil household. Zeoticus gave them a warm smile and waved a hand for them to raise their head, before he approached his daughter and greeted her with a quick hug and an arm around her shoulder. Welcome home, Rheas. He spoke to his daughter before turning his attention over to the devil standing behind her. I see that your own family has grown tremendously over the past few months. Gasper-kun, it's good to see you out and about with my daughter again. Thank you, sir. The damper, who had put on his paper bag mask, answered nervously. Office-sama, it's truly an honor for us to finally meet you, and to have you here with us today. Zeoticus then turned his attention over to Office and lowered his head to her, his wife doing the same behind him. Please, if you ever need anything, please don't hesitate to tell us. Sure. The Ouroboros dragon god gave a simple answer. Naruto, my boy. Zeoticus then addressed Naruto cheerily as he turned his attention over to his daughter's boyfriend. It has been a long time since we've last seen each other. You're looking well. Thank you, sir. You're looking very well too. Naruto grinned as he shook hand with the older devil, noticing how Vanillana's lips twitched. But he soon found out why. There's no reason to be so formal, Naruto. The brown-haired woman gave a beatific smile as she spoke to him. We would much prefer it if you called us Ka-sama and Tu-sama, or Mom and Dad. Either way is fine, isn't that right, dear? Yes, of course. Zeoticus wholeheartedly agreed. Okasama. Oto-sama. While a flustered Rheas exclaimed, Naruto could only chuckle nervously in response as blood rushed to his face. Though he couldn't help but glance over to Rheas and smile at her when she did the same, and their eyes met, something that wasn't missed by both parents, who both looked very pleased. It appeared that his first summer vacation in the underworld was just getting started. Chapter 33. Era, your footwork is quite amazing, Naruto-sama. Graphia Lucifuge praised as she guided Naruto across the floor to the slow rhythm of music in a slow dance. Despite having no problem following her instructions, Naruto was getting more and more nervous as he was getting to Graphia, so close that there were times their faces were only a few inches from each other, and her breasts were pushing against his chest as he held her in his arms. But it is as expected, considering that you have become quite skilled in several arts of swordsmanship. I guess. Naruto chuckled nervously in response. Their movement had become slow and deliberate. Why am I the only one getting dance lessons again? The blonde decided to ask, having been called to the room earlier that morning by Graphia to start the dancing lesson. From what he had heard, Rhea's mother was supposed to be the one teaching him how to dance properly, but she had to leave for an emergency business meeting with her husband, leaving her with no choice but to call in Graphia to teach him in her stead. Despite being a maid, Graphia came from the house of Lucifuge, a noble family of pure-blooded devils from the extra devils, so it was as expected for her to be able to dance expertly, and fully capable of teaching him to do the same. Kiba Yuto-san has already mastered these sorts of techniques, as expected of a knight. The silver-haired maid answered as she continued to dance with Naruto. Meanwhile, Gasper-san is a member of a distinguished vampire, so he knows etiquette. You, on the other hand, are a commoner from the human world, so it will be very troubling if you don't acquire these skills beyond a certain level. In the near future, you will eventually have to make your appearance with Ryosoju-sama in high society events, so it is very important for you to remember customary practices even a little. You guys are still on about that, huh? Naruto asked with a small chuckle. Sure, I love Rheas and all, but don't you think that it's still a bit too soon for us to talk about marriage? I mean, we're still in high school, right? That's true, but I do believe you understand that Lord and Lady Gremory have all the reasons to be looking forward to it, especially after Oju-sama has already openly fought to cancel her marriage engagement with the third son of the Phoenix family. Plus, she has also never shown any interest in boys before you, so it's only natural for her parents to be excited when she can find someone that she can truly be happy with. Graphia explained in her normally calm tone, and Naruto couldn't help but smile at that. So, do they know that I am building a harem? Grafia cut him off and continued his question despite the fact that Naruto did not intend to ask something like that, at least in such manner, making him almost trip over his own feet and step on hers, but the silver-haired maid held him firmly and kept him level with her grip on his body. When the blonde stood back up, he could see a rare teasing smile on Grafia's face as she looked at him. What's with you female devils and the word harem? Is it really something that you can say so casually? He asked in disbelief, trying his best to keep a calm tone. Grafia tilted her head to the side as the teasing smile on her face widened even further before she asked, "Oh? So, someone else other than Oju-sama already talked to you about it, didn't she? More like teased me though, but yeah. I guess." Naruto answered while laughing forcefully. So, does her parents know? They do, or at least Venelana-sama does. If I can see that the girls of Oju-sama's peerage are attracted to you, then of course she can as well. Grafia spoke, and Naruto expected as much from Ria's mother, having talked and gotten to know her during his time recovering from the raiding game against Razor. Though he had yet to decide if that made Venelana incredible or scary. So, they don't mind that their daughter is the only one that I am dating. Or will date. Grafia added it doesn't matter to them really, Naruto-sama, but the thing that they will be most concerned about is if Ryosoju-sama is strong enough to take the lead. Venelana-sama is the one who takes the reins with her husband, so it'd be obvious if she wishes for her daughter to be the same. Naruto widened his eyes at that. No wonder why the two of them were perfectly fine with him having a harem. Again, he's not trying to build a harem or anything like that. I guess the main problem for me is whether the girls that I like will be willing to accept it. I mean, Momo-chan seemed pretty cool with it, but... Oh, so Momo Hanakai-san of Sona Citri-sama's peerage is the other girl? Grafia gasped lightly with a small teasing smile. I'm impressed, Naruto-sama. I thought it was either Asia-san or Akino-san. That's a long reach even for you. Please, Grafia-san. It's not like that. Naruto could only find himself chuckling nervously as he responded to her. Grafia then spoke in a much softer tone, joke aside, you don't have to be so worried about it. After all, it's natural in our world for women to be attracted to men who are both powerful and charming, and for those men to want to be surrounded by beautiful women. You used to be a human, so I understand if the idea sounds very extreme to you, but trust me, you will get used to it eventually. Thank you, Grafia-san. Naruto smiled gratefully at Grafia, expressing his gratitude to the earnest sincerity in her words. Grafia nodded her head at him before she spun him around, making him spin a few times away from her before coming to a stop. That's enough talking, Naruto-sama. Grafia spoke in a firm tone as Naruto turned around to face her. It's time for us to turn our focus back to your dance lesson. As the head maid of the Gremory Devil House, and the personal assistant of Surzex Lucifer-sama himself, I will not accept anything but absolute perfection from you. So, prepare yourself. Bring it on, Grafia-san. Naruto grinned. He had survived fencing training with Fiora, the Grand Duelist, so of course there's no chance that a dance with the silver-haired Queen of Annihilation wouldn't be the end of him, right? Right. Drake. Are your feet okay, Naruto-san? Asia asked in concern, noticing how Naruto was limping ahead of her. Ha! Oh, just a bit sore from dancing, that's all. Naruto answered the blonde with a grin, making Asia look at him for a second. She then grabbed his hand and caused Naruto and the rest of their group to stop and turn around to look at them before lowering herself down to use her sacred gear on his feet, engulfing them in the healing aura of Twilight Healing. After a second, Naruto's feet no longer felt sore, making him smile gratefully at Asia when she stood up. Thank you, Asia. Please don't mention it, Naruto-san. The former nun smiled bright at him as she nodded her head. With that, the group continued to advance forward, following their master Rias to the gathering of young devils, where they would meet the four Mao and the higher-ups of the devil faction in preparation for the Youth Devil Raiding Game tournament. Since the place was swarmed by paparazzi and reporters, as the tournament was possibly the biggest event of the entire underworld. It had taken them a while to get through the crowd waiting outside, making it very possible that they were the last to arrive. Everyone, I'll say it one more time. No matter what happens, stay in a calm state of mind. The people above are our future rivals, even the ones who had fought side by side with us in Iceland. We mustn't show an unsightly form, understand? Everyone nodded resolutely at their king's words that were filled with fighting spirit. It didn't take long for them to arrive at the meeting floor, where they were greeted by an employee who gave a bow towards Rias before saying with a hand gesture to the side. "Welcome, Gremory-sama. Please come this way." Everyone followed the employee until they were met with a group of people standing in front of a pair of wooden doors. It wasn't that difficult for them to recognize the tall and muscular build of Serord Bale, who's now being accompanied by not just his queen, but his entire peerage. Serord. Rias called, acknowledging her cousin with a radiant smile as she walked with her peerage over to him and his group. Rias. The Balear grinned at his cousin while his peerage lowered their heads respectfully to her, before he turned his attention over to Rias' peerage, smiling at them as he greeted, "Hello there everyone, Naruto." "Hey there Serord-san." Naruto grinned and raised his hand to bump the side of his fist with Serord. He then looked at the rest of Serord's peerage and much like their king himself, all of them looked incredibly strong. "What are you doing out here, Serord? Don't you want to come in?" Rias couldn't help but ask, crossing her arms as she looked at the doors of the no doubt meeting hall. "Oh well, the reason why we are out here is because it has become so idiotic in there." The Balear explained with a bitter smile. Sikvera, Sona, and the Astaroth were the first to arrive. Zephyr came last, but he immediately picked an argument with Sikvera, and the two have been at each other's throats since. As if on cue, suddenly a booming sound was heard from the nearby room, followed by a tremor that shook the hallway. "Whoa. Sounds like a pretty heated argument in there," Naruto commented as he grabbed Asia and prevented her from falling, making her look at him thankfully. He knew Sikvera. Someone with a cold and no-nonsense attitude like her wasn't going to accept disrespectful behaviors toward her so easily. "This is why I advised not meeting each other before the official meeting." Serord sighed before he followed Rias, who had entered the room with her peerage. When the two groups got in the meeting hall, they weren't surprised to see that the place had become a complete mess. All tables, chairs and decorations had been either flipped over or completely destroyed. In the middle of the room, two groups of people were glaring at each opposing party with their weapons and magic at the ready. On one side was none other than Sikvera Agars and her peerage themselves, while on the other were a group of devils that was being led by a goblin-faced devils. Despite the chaotic state of the room, there was a table safe from the destruction at the corner of the room, and one man was calmly drinking tea in the midst of the chaos. "Zephyr, do you realize what you just said?" Sikvera asked, her tone as cold as ice, saying something like that to me will get you killed, you know. "Do you want to die? Even if I kill you here, I won't be held responsible by the devils on top, you know." The leader of the group with goblin-like devils, Zephyr, replied with a different kind of hostility. "Ha! I'm not afraid to say it straight to your face again, bitch. Why don't you go to a private room with me, and I will show you how to have fun, or are you too scared to go anywhere without your guards? No wonder why you're still a virgin who hasn't let a man come near her till now. Geez, all the women of families of the mouse stink of virgins and are unbearable. That's why I said that I'd do a formal opening ceremony for you. Yikes, and I think that Rat Twitch has the worst attitude. You tell me about it." Every devil present in the room immediately turned their heads over to Naruto and Yumi, with the latter immediately realizing that she had just spoken those words out loud enough for the whole room to hear. Without a pause, she shot behind Naruto and hid behind him with her companion, peeking her head up from behind him to look at the goblin-faced devil who was glaring at her and her summoner, as Naruto merely raised his hands up in defense. "We didn't say anything," he said, but knew that no one would trust him. Naruto-kun. To everyone's shock and surprise, Sikvera's expression flipped 180 degrees, and gone was the serious young woman with a cold and chilling aura about her as she ran over to Naruto with a beaming smile on her face. "You're here. It's so good to see you." She greeted cheerily, sounding more like an excited high school girl than a proper young lady of one of the highest-ranking devil families with the rank of Archduke. "Ah, hello Seek-chan." Naruto greeted the Agar's heiress with a smile before he nodded his head at her servants as they rushed over to her side. "Hey guys. What in the Mao's name is going on?" Zephador asked in shock and disbelief before he stepped toward Seek Vera. "Hey, bitch. I am not done." Before Zephador could reach her, Serorg had stepped forward and spoken up with a strong voice. "I advise you against continuing fighting, rebellious son of the Glaciolabalus family. If you continue any further than this, I will be your opponent. That's your last warning." A throbbing vein appeared on Zephador's forehead as he glared at Serorg for those words, his face turning red with rage. "Now, listen here you incompetent Baal." Boom. Before he could finish that sentence, a resounding sound was heard, as Serorg Baal sent Zephador flying towards a wall with a single blow, creating a massive crater from the sheer force of the impact. "You son of a bitch. Damn Baal family." As Zephador tried to pick himself up while holding his bloody face, his servants cried out in pure rage and turned to glare at Serorg, who merely crossed his arms as his own peerage rushed at his side and formed a protective circle around their king. The atmosphere in the meeting room couldn't grow any more intense after that. "Take good care of your master." Serorg spoke up simply with a powerful presence about him. "There's still time for you to help him before the Mao arrive. Even if you turn your swords towards me now, you'll gain nothing but utter defeat." The devils of the Glaciolabalus peerage gritted their teeth, but didn't take much time to accept their defeat and run over to their master, trying to pick him up only for him to shove them back and do it himself, almost falling over again in the process. Serorg just exhaled a little before he looked at his peerage and nodded his head to them, making them lower their weapons and magic, but not their guards. "I guess that settles it then," Serorg said as he turned around to look at Rias with her group and Seek Vera. "I hope that Zephador will learn his lesson. He looks quite drunk but still," Rias said with a small sigh as she watched Zephador and his peerage walking away. "We all know that won't, Rias." Sona Citri spoke up as she walked to them with her queen, Tsubaki Shinra and Bishop, Momo Hanakai following closely behind her. Upon seeing Naruto, the white-haired beauty gave him a beautiful smile and a wave of her hand, which he couldn't help but return wholeheartedly. "Sona." Rias smiled at her rival and childhood friend, as Seek Vera and Serorg gave the Citri heiress a nod in acknowledgement. Before she could say anything more, her head suddenly snapped to Seek Vera, when the Agar's heiress grabbed her boyfriend's hand and raised it up to write something into his palm with a pen, appearing to be a series of numbers. What's this?" Naruto couldn't help but ask as Seek Vera finished writing and put the pen away, making it disappear into a magic circle. "My phone number," she told him, making Naruto widen his eyes in surprise, and everyone around them to gasp in shock, no one more so than Rias herself. "Hey Naruto-kun, if you have free time this weekend, please come to my family's personal resort. My parents have been waiting for the opportunity to meet you, so please allow me the pleasure of introducing you to them." Ahem, Naruto has a training session this weekend to prepare for the tournament, Seek-chan. Before Naruto could speak, Rias had grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back behind her to step forward and face Seek Vera, who instantly returned to her usual cold self. "And quite frankly, I'm sure that you should too. At one point, we will be your opponents in the tournament after all." "I know that we are childhood friends too, Rias, but I don't remember giving you back the permission to call me Seek-chan like you did back in the day." The Agar's heiress spoke as she crossed her arms under her ample bust, returning Rias' glare with one of her own. "Also, the Archduke and Archduchess themselves request the meeting with your pawn. Are you defying their wish, Rias? I am sure they will understand that Naruto needs his training." Rias answered simply, and the two glared heatedly at each other, not needing to speak any more word to raise the tension between them. Naruto could only turn his eyes nervously between them before he looked at Serorg, asking him with a finger pointing at his girlfriend and Seek Vera, Serorg-san, can you use that great king authority on you and do something about this too? I think you will have to sort this out on your own, my friend. Was the only reply the Baelair had for Naruto, as he gave him a pat on the shoulder. Fortunately for Naruto, the first group of top devils and Mao arrived, allowing the gathering of young devils to truly begin, and more or less saving him from the trouble of dealing with two high-class strong-willed young ladies who would probably not listen to him at all. Break. Everyone is gathered, good. An old devil spoke up, as Rias and the other heirs stepped forward while their peerages stood in 5 straight lines behind them, looking up at Surzex, the other Mao and the leading body of the devil faction. You have been gathered here today, so that we can see the faces of all those who will carry the fate of the devil faction. This type of meeting will be held from time to time, so that we can see how the young devils are doing. You 6 are the top and most promising high-class devils of this generation, who carry the tradition of a pure blood and abilities no one can doubt. Another devil spoke, appearing to be one of the organizers of the rating game tournament. That's why we'd like you guys to compete against one another as a way of showcasing your power as well as increasing your strength. Surzex-sama, may I ask if we are ever going to be sent into battle against the Cows Brigade? Out of nowhere Serorg asked with a firm look on his face, as he looked directly at the crimson-haired Mao, who gave a smile before answering. I do not know, though I appreciate your eagerness. However, if possible, I would not like to send you. Surzex answered in a calm tone. Serorg couldn't help but raise an eyebrow as he continued to question, why Surzex-sama? I know that we are still young, but if we don't do anything then. Serorg, I recognize your bravery and your strength. I have seen them in the battle against the hero faction in Iceland, a battle that the world will never forget where a group of young devils stood up against terrorists, and an army of monsters created to specially target them. Surzex interrupted as he spoke calmly, but at the same time, you are reckless. Above all, who are still growing. Losing any of you here would be a great loss to not just us, but the future of our faction. I want you to understand. For us, all of you are more important than you think. At that, Serorg lowered his head and said, I understand. But as Naruto had expected, his expression looked dissatisfied. I'm glad, Serorg. Surzex gave a smile before he continued, looking at the other high-class devils now. Before we move on to the upcoming rating game tournament, we would like to hear about your dreams and hopes. So please, can you tell us your respective goals for the future? Sure enough, the first to respond to his request was none other than the Baelair himself, doing so without a moment of hesitation. My dream is to become a Mao, Surzex-sama. Ho, ho, the devils sitting around the Mao made a sound in surprise as they eyed Serorg in interest, curiosity, but also dissatisfaction. The great king family has never produced a Mao, you know. Despite being told that by one of the higher-ups, Surzex confidently responded, his voice never wavering, when the people of the underworld feel that there is no other choice but me to be the Mao, I will become one. I see. Surzex and the other Mao smiled, at least Serafal and Ajuka, as the fourth one who Naruto didn't recognize looked like he's about to pass out. Rias was the next to voice her dream to the Mao, and as she stepped forward and spoke up her dream of continuing to live as the future leader of the Gremory Devil household and winning every rating game match she participates, Naruto noticed the sixth heir, who he had no doubt was Diodora Astaroth, used the opportunity of turning his head to look at Rias to glance even further back and fix his eyes on Asia. Something that he had also noticed was the fact that every single member of his peerage were girls, and they looked to be former priestesses or nuns of the church. That alone gave Naruto an even worse feeling about the Astaroth heir. After Rias, Diodora and the rest of the heirs took turns stepping forward and telling the Mao their dreams and goals, until only one person was left at the end, and that was none other than Sona Citri herself, who spoke up. Mao-sama, my dream is to build a school for rating games in the underworld. A high-class devil raised an eyebrow in curiosity as he asked, if it's to teach about rating games, isn't there already one for that? Without much hesitation, Sona responded as her peerage proudly listened to her speech. But it is the school where only high-class devils and devils of privileged social standing are accepted. The school I want. want to build is one where even low-class devils and reincarnated devils can also attend without being discriminated against. However, ha 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 ha. With the only exceptions being the 4 Mao, who looked very interested at the idea, the so-called superior devils laughed. Several of them even had a mocking look on their faces as they looked down at Sona, who seemed to have expected it, and remained calm and composed. Naruto, knowing that he would only bring Rias troubles if he spoke anything up now, remained as calm as he possibly could. He then looked over to Momo, and could see her shaking in anger, while looking up at the devils sitting above them, but she was among those who were better at controlling it than the rest, namely Saji and Issei, both of whom were glaring at the devils sitting above them. Their eyes met for a brief second, and Naruto gave Momo an assuring nod, which she returned after taking a deep breath to calm down. That is impossible. I'm sorry, but it can't happen. Oh, I understand, you dreamy little girl. How good it is to be young. However, for the next Citri family heiress to have that kind of dream, I have to thank you for making such a good joke. In the midst of all this, Sona then spoke up frankly. I'm serious. Calming down from his laughter, one of the superiors spoke as he pointed a finger at Sona. Sona Citri Dano. Low-class and reincarnated demons merely work for their masters, us high-class devils, and are chosen only for their talents. Wouldn't the creation of this school be a lack of respect for traditional families, who value prestige and tradition? No matter how much people say us as a species have entered a period of change, change can be good and bad. Something like teaching mere low-class devils is none of your business. Don't ridicule Kaisha's dreams, Sona-sama, like that, Saji shouted in anger, unable to control himself anymore, beating Issei Hayado to it as he tried to step forward, but was held back by the girls of Sona's peerage. Look how you talk, young reincarnated devil. Sona Dano, your servant has not been properly trained. Another superior devil scoffed as he glared at Saji. I apologize. I'll talk to him later. Sona merely said with her head lowered before she narrowed her eyes and scolded Saji. The young man also looked like he wanted to say something to her, but he held back and stepped back. Geez. All of you adults are getting together to bully my sister. Seraphal suddenly spoke up, looking to be in a very bad mood. I know that I am a Mao, but as an older sister I have my limits, you know. If you keep trashing her dreams like that, then I will have to do some bullying on my own too, you know. She finished with a cold tone as the temperature in the hall dropped so much one could see their own breaths. The group of devils around the Mao gulped nervously while sweating bullets and trying to avoid her glare, deciding to keep their opinions to themselves from there. I think, if Sona and her peerage can prove themselves in the upcoming tournament, then there won't be anything to complain about, right? Surzex asked with a small smile before continuing, looking at his sister as he said, why don't we use this opportunity to set up the first match of the tournament as well? Rias and Sona, would you like to be the first to face off against each other? The two heiresses became surprised at his suggestion. They looked at each other, but at the same time neither looked like they had anything against the idea, both knowing sooner or later they would have to face off against each other in the tournament. Naturally, we would love nothing more than to see the peerage with the young devil who gave us the idea of the new game mode in action first and foremost. Surzex spoke, explaining as he looked at Naruto. On the other hand, I am sure that Sona and her peerage are dying for the chance to prove themselves and solidify their shared dream. I don't think we can start the tournament with a better matchup than this. The rest of the group of adult devils couldn't help but agree with him as they turned to whisper to each other and nod their heads approvingly at his words. Bucho nodded her head at her brother, and then turned over to Sona to flash her a defiant smile, which the Citri heiress returned with a mocking smile. You should feel honored, Rias. It appears to me that you will be my first opponent in a raiding game. Now that we're up against each other, I'm not going to lose to you, Sona. Then that settles it then. Surzex said with a warm smile. Seraphal, meanwhile, looked very happy too as she stood up from her seat and cheered a match between Rias-chan and Sona-chan. Yes. Ajuka then spoke up for the first time, smiling at the two heiresses as he leaned forward on his seat. the date of the start of the tournament, and your match will be the 20th of August in the human world. You can enjoy your time as you wish until then. Details of the match and rules will be given later. And with that, the first match of the tournament between Sona Citri and Rias Gremory had been decided. Break. I see. So, it will be a showdown against the Citri group. It was the morning after the gathering of young devils. Naruto, Rias and their groups, with the additions of Ravel and Irina, were currently sitting around Azazel, who had in his hands several documents as he spoke to the group in the large garden of Gremory residence. Today is the 28th of July in the human world, so you guys will have 20 days to prepare for the match. Azazel nodded his head as he stroked his chin, handing the documents over to Ravel so she could hold on to them for him. It's best that we start your training right now. Sure, some of you have overcome your own limitations, but there are more rooms to grow. I've already made the training list for each of you right here. He stated, tapping the stack of documents Ravel was holding. I'm grateful and all, but is it fair for the other team if we receive advice from the governor of the fallen angels? Naruto couldn't help but ask, raising his hand to voice his opinion. In truth, no. Azazel answered while shaking his head. It actually comes down to the pride of you young devils, whether or not you will accept third parties' help. This tournament sure has become a big event everyone in the world is looking forward to, but at its core it's still an opportunity for you young devils to grow stronger. Not to mention that the organizers wish for the tournament to be a blast so that they can bring the new game mode into official rating game, and there are different agendas going behind the scenes as well, so of course they will have people like me giving out advices that every team can use to increase your chance of winning. And I also heard that Seraphal asked the Blaze Meteor Dragon and a former Dragon King Tannen to train the two dragons of their groups, so trust me when I say that it's fair for you guys to receive my help. Rias and her group widened her eyes at that. It appeared in 20 days they were in for a real challenge, so let's begin with the king, you Rias. Azazel began, picking up a file from the stack of document Ravel was holding and handing it over to Rias before saying, while the new game mode is no longer about winning by eliminating the king from the game, I have reasons to believe that the organizers will still find a way to make it an extremely valuable target, so you will need to increase your strength individually. The governor explained as Rias read the instructions on the note from the beginning. You have been exceptionally talented even for a high-class devil. Even if you live your life normally as you currently are, you will eventually grow to become the highest-class devils, possibly even beyond ultimate class. However, your wish is to become stronger than you would in that future, right? Yes. Rias nodded her head firmly. Then follow your training according to what is written on that file. Azazel said also, you also need to improve your quality as a king, the leader of your group. What you will need is quick-wittedness and clear judgment to deal with every situation your opponents throw at you and figure out a way to help yourself and your peerage defeat them. For the time being, besides your training, you will also need to learn everything you can about your opponents, understanding their strengths as well as weaknesses, and most important of all, prepare for the new game mode. The full rules have yet to be revealed, but I trust that you will prepare for everything. Understood. The crimson-haired heiress nodded her head in understanding before she took another look at her training regime. Next is Akino. During the battle against the hero faction, you have accepted the blood that flows through your veins and tapped into the power of holy lightning, yes? Despite looking a little bitter, Akino nodded her head and accepted a file from Azazel. Like Rias, you will stick to your core and train to increase your demonic power. You will follow the special training I have for you to master holy lightning at the highest level. Also, as the queen of this group, you are the second in command. You need to make sure you two can lead them if your king isn't in position to do so. Yes. Akino said simply. Kiba and Zenobia. Azazel then turned his attention over to the two knights of the group and spoke to them while handing out two files. Kiba, you need to be able to maintain your balance breaker longer. About your swordsmanship, I have talked to Suji. He's willing to start from square one with you, correct? Yes, sensei. I intended to start my training from the beginning. Good. And Zenobia, you need to work on your mastery over Durandal. Azazel looked at the blue-haired knight and spoke to her as Zenobia read her file. You also need to work on your technique. Learn to be calm and composed. Sometimes, charging head first into a fight with everything you have is not the way to win it. You're next, Gasper. The governor of Grigori then snapped over to Gasper, who flinched and exclaimed fearfully. It didn't take much for them to realize that he scared him on purpose. Obviously, your biggest problem is your fear. Your sacred gear is immensely strong, and at the moment you have a teacher who can show you how to properly work around it. So, what you need to work on is your confidence, as well as your power as a half-vampire. Why yes. I will give everything I got. The damper said with a nervous nod. Next is Asia. The former nun flinched as she was addressed by Azazel. You will work to improve your strength, stamina and magic. Also, your main task will be to strengthen your sacred gear. I understand. Asia nodded resolutely. The speed of your recovery ability is already great. However, the problem is the range. You need to be right next to your allies to heal them, correct? We can't have that in a fight. Also, the biggest weakness of your ability is also your best quality, which is your kindness. Your kind nature will end up healing both allies and enemies alike, so we can just work to increase the range of your twilight healing into something like a healing aura around you. I recommend that you should learn how to fire her healing power like a projectile. Also, every time you guys go into a fight, Naruto always leaves Yumi behind to protect you, correct? Asia glanced over to Naruto before nodding her head. Yumi was currently playing with Kuroka in her room, keeping her company, because she could not leave unless under supervision, so she was not present at the moment. Well, you should also try if you can work with her. She's a strong healer, but like you, she can only give her support to the one she is attached to. See if you two can work in tandem with each other. Also, don't forget about your familiar. He's young, but he's still a dragon and can provide you with some offensive powers. I understand. I'll do my best. Even though she looked extremely nervous, Asia responded with resolve in her voice. Good, now Kaneko. I have zero complaints about your qualities as a rook, and you have also removed your own limitations, so I actually don't have any special training for you. Azazel spoke, much to Kaneko's surprise, but it wasn't hard for her or everyone else to know where he was getting. The best that you can get is from your sister. Continue to train under her, and I am sure that you can grow to become one of the most powerful rooks. Okay then. The white-haired girl nodded her head. Last but not least, Naruto. Everyone then looked away from their files and turned their attention over to Naruto, as the blood stepped forward to receive his training. These are all yours. What? The blonde exclaimed in shock as Azazel grabbed the whole stack of documents and handed it over to him. These are all the theories that I have had so far on your sacred gear. Azazel stated with a smug smile as he rubbed his chin. I want you to test them all out, see which of them is possible, and then report back to me ASAP. This is... The blonde's eyes widened in awe and amazement as he picked up a file from the stack and gave it a quick read. You will like that. I had that idea when you told me we could control the Mecha Kingdom mechs with your permission. Azazel nodded his head before continuing. If even one of those abilities is possible, it will be the real game changers for you and your team in this tournament. Aside from that, your actual training will be more or less like Kiba's. You need to be able to maintain your balance breaker for a longer duration. You will also need to work on your technique, stamina and magic ability. So basically everything? Naruto asked with a deadpan expression. It made him remember that when a pro league team was so bad that the fans would joke about the fact that they only needed to work on basically everything to become the best team in the world. It's not that they aren't already good enough, just you having even more raw power than your master is a clear proof of that. However, I do believe you still have plenty of room to grow even stronger than you already are now, given the right training and teacher who can help you explore your full potential as a devil. Teacher? So, I will have a special teacher for my own training? Naruto couldn't help but ask with an excited smile. Who is it? Azazel merely did a gesture with his head, and Naruto looked over that direction to see the silver-haired Queen of Annihilation, Graphy Elusifuge, standing in the hallway of the mansion, looking at him from a window with a stern expression on her face. Special recap. Name, Naruto Uzumaki. Birthday, October 10th. Hobbies, gaming. Nicknames, the League Summoner, Earth Summoner of the League of Legends, Pawn, of Rias Gremory, Saito Senpai, by Kaneko, Bronze Eye Police, by other League of Legends players. Power and abilities. Sacred Gear, Runeterra Arsenal, category, unknown. A sacred gear that allows him to tap into the powers of Runeterra, the world of the MOBA online video game, League of Legends. Runeterra Arsenal allows Naruto to summon those that are regarded as champions of the League of Legends, as well as create replicas of their weapons as long as his sacred gear still has data of them, meaning that said champions had to still be in Runeterra for his weapons creating ability to work. Abilities, for it is a sacred gear no one has ever seen before, no one knows the full extent of Runeterra Arsenal's abilities. The abilities that Naruto had discovered so far in the story are: plus weapon creating ability. Similar to creation-type sacred gears, Runeterra Arsenal had the power to allow Naruto to create weapons of those who are regarded as champions of the League of Legends of the world Runeterra, hence the name Runeterra Arsenal. Each weapon has its own unique usages and powers, and Naruto could create as many copies of the same weapon as he wanted as long as their owners, his champions of the League, are still inside Runeterra, thus making him unable to create these weapons if he has summoned its user to his world. Plus champion summoning ability. Naruto has the power to summon champions of the League of Legends to his world, and has them fought alongside him. Each champion requires a certain amount of demonic power to summon, and the summoning method is similar to open a portal, which allows his champion to pass through to enter this world, hence the reason Naruto does not need to expense his demonic power to let them remain in his world. The only exception seems to be Aurelian Soul, as for an unknown reason, Naruto needs to continuously supply his sacred gear with a tremendous amount of his power to keep Aurelian Soul in his world. The reason has yet to be discovered. But Azazel theories that it can be because of the crown that still links him to Mount Targon of Runeterra. Plus fusing, Naruto can fuse with his champions, gaining their knowledge as well as the unique powers that they have obtained and mastered over the courses of their life, at the cost of his own demonic power. He can also fuse with multiple champions at the same time, to create deadly and powerful combinations that allow him to use all of their powers at the same time. This ability can be used in tandem with any of his other abilities to give him an edge against his opponents in battle. However, the weakness of this ability is that Naruto can be influenced by the personalities of his champions if they want to, and thus, he has to come to terms with them before fusing to avoid the risk of doing things that he normally will never. This can be avoided by a special device that Professor Heimerdinger invented for him, but it has been destroyed so many times in battles Naruto doesn't bother with it anymore. Plus, he also prefers to fuse with the champions who are willing to cooperate with him. Another weakness is when combined with multiple champions, they also have to accept each other, or Naruto will suffer a mental breakdown and personalities crisis. At the moment, Naruto can fuse with 3 different champions at the same time. Plus appearances change. Naruto can change the appearances of his champions, giving them different looks that are based on their skins in the game. Alone, this ability is used purely for cosmetic changes and has no actual special power, but this ability is the one most important for Naruto to utilize the full powers of Balance Breaker. Runeterra Arsenal Balance Breaker, Multiverse Transcendences, Naruto's Balance Breaker, the ability to give his champions, whose looks have been changed by his appearance-changing ability, true meanings and stories that transcend over the multiverse of endless possibilities, granting them the new powers and special abilities that are based accordingly on the stories of their current looks. A major weakness of his Balance Breaker is that Naruto's champions cannot retain the powers of their forms for any more than a maximum of 30 seconds themselves, but Naruto can fix this problem by directly fusing with them, increasing the timer and wielding their empowered powers and special abilities the same way his normal fusing work at the cost of a tremendous amount of demonic power. Multiverse Transcendence also works on weapons. Other abilities in magic without fusing with his champions. Rune Magic, Naruto is very skilled in using summoner's runes, which allows him to increase or decrease the sizes of champions for convenience purposes. He can also use a special rune to summon his champions to his side whenever he wants, as long as they have been summoned to his world with his Sacred Gears champion summoning ability first. Naruto is also learning other rune spells under Rise, the Rogue Mage. Other magic: Naruto can use other types of spells and magic on a basic level. Master hand-to-hand combat: Naruto is a skilled hand-to-hand combat fighter, having learnt martial arts and how to fight with his fists under Lucian and Set. Master swordsmanship and weapons specialist: Naruto is extremely skilled with swords, his preferred choice of weapon when going into battle, having been trained in Wujou swordsmanship and fencing by Master Ian Fiora, the Grand Duelist. He's capable of fighting on par against skilled swordsmen like Kiba Yuto, who is the student of Tsuji Okita, the Knight of Surzex Lucifer. Being the student of the Grandmaster at Arms, Jax, and learning from his champions, Naruto is proficient with a variety of weapons, even unorthodox supernatural weapons. Marksmanship: Naruto knows how to aim. Ninjutsu: Naruto can use a number of ninjutsu that he has been taught to by Shin, leader of the Kinku Order, an organization of ninja-like warriors. That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfictions. Looking forward to having you on board again.